So I'm Derek, and I'm the chief economist for the Division of Financial Management. Division of Financial Management, if you're not aware of that, we are the governor's budget arm. We work on delivering the budget for the governor. Greg and I work together to develop the revenue estimates for the state. So we do all the general fund elements of the budget. We do that, we put it together, and then we present it to the governor and to our budget staff, and then they will decide how the money gets spent. So we do none of the spending, just trying to talk, we just focus on what is coming in. The other thing we do, especially this time of year, is we are responsible for fiscal notes on some of the bills. Last year, the real challenging one was the IRC, thanks to the tax reform that took place at the federal level. So we worked on the conformity bill. We also worked on the individual income and corporate income tax cut bill. We put the fiscal impact together for that one. So that's kind of the stuff we do. Again, two economists, we both have degrees in economics. So let's get going. We'll look at the national, and the Idaho economic forecast is really, I'm going to talk about the revenues instead of just the Idaho economy. Oh, it actually works. Mm-hmm. Oh, it has a laser. Okay, so one thing I want to talk about is, if you look at the economy right now, it's actually doing pretty well. By the way, I'm going to be using the state fiscal year numbers instead of calendar year numbers. Because when we did our presentation, that's what we did. So just so you can know, again, in this time of year, we use fiscal year numbers. So if you look at the number here, for instance, for fiscal year 2019, which is this one here, the prediction is we're going to finish at about 3% growth, which is the strongest since fiscal year 2015. And one of the reasons for that is, and you can see it around. I mean, did you guys see what the employment numbers are this morning?
304?
Yeah, 304 new jobs. Okay, very strong. Okay, unemployment at 4%. So the economy is doing very well. But the question is, can it keep on doing that well? And we think that the economy is going to slow down a little bit. It's not going to be able to keep up that pace. So if you have to be careful about thinking, well, we just did 3%, I'm going to use 3% from now on. And so I'm going to try to tell you why we don't think it's going to stay at 3%. And the next, and this is GDP, and this is national. And this is one of the reasons, is because I've added this red line to my chart. This red line is about how fast the economy could grow at full employment. Okay? And right here you can say, well, look, I mean, this is faster than, we're actually growing faster than you said it could. But you remember, this is full employment, and this is what the government thinks full employment is, or economists who do these kind of things. They think it's about 4.5%, 5%. Well, we're below that now, so that's why we can grow faster right now. The other thing that's going to happen is, especially starting fiscal year 2019, is you get the hit. I mean, you get the adrenaline push from the tax reform. This is where they start hitting. Okay, so you get the big. That's where you get the big jump. You get this big stimulus hitting. But it's a one-time. Once you lower the rates, they stay low. They don't lower them every year. So it's going to be harder and harder to keep up that pace, and we think that's what's going to happen as part of it. In fact, that's a big part of it. But by the way, if you have questions, stop me at any time. Okay? Now, one of the reasons, okay, there's that. This is considered full employment. You can see this is where the economists think it is. I mean, you know, a lot of people think it should be at 0. But that's not true. That is not what we consider it, because, and for the reason is, it's kind of like, think about apartment vacancies in a house. I mean, you know, a healthy housing rental market is what, probably 95% occupied. You're always going to have some, because you always have turnover. So you're never fully occupied all the time. Kind of the same thing goes on with full employment. So that's what we're thinking here. Now, one of the challenges you have is, this is the U.S. unemployment rate, and again, you see, anybody remember the recession? Unfortunately, we all do, right? If you look here, look at what's happening. This was the unemployment rate here on this side on the left-hand scale. It was over 9%. This is full employment, okay? That started working down. So this means you have plenty of excess labor. What happened is it started changing, and in 2017 it actually dropped below. Now we're in the labor market is tightening on us, okay? That's one of the limitations to the economy is finding the workforce to do the work. And this doesn't even talk about qualification. This is just pure numbers. So that, I think, is going to be one of the limiting factors.
Are we in fiscal year 2019 now, or are we?
Yes, yes. It's June 30th, it'll end. Yeah. So why is the labor market tightening? Well, one of the reasons is we have the economy's been growing. The other thing is, this is the national labor force growth, okay? It's growing, if you can see, it's about 1% a year. And that's where you're getting your people from. Now, to put in perspective, some of us are old enough to be baby boomers in the room, okay? When we were turning 18, the period we were turning 18, labor force is growing 2.5% a year. It's a huge drop, okay? So, we're just not, our labor force is not growing fast enough. And what happens is, one of the consequences of that is labor gets expensive, like anything else. It gets scarce, it gets expensive. And eventually, those higher wages end up in inflation. So you can see inflation's at 2.5%, 2.3%, 1.9%. Now, again, some of us are old enough to remember in the 80s, we never saw 2.5%. It was above 10%. Okay, so to me, it's not that big a deal. The other thing is the Federal Reserve thinks the measure they use for inflation, they like about 2%. So it's kind of close to what they want. So expensive labor and less labor. Now there's another way you can grow the economy, if you think about it. And for some reason, I still don't understand. And I've trained as an economist. Anybody, you guys all took econ, right? At some point, yeah. So, refresh your memory or bring up bad memories. We consider investment. We call that in economics. It's capital. I mean, everybody else thinks of capital as money. For us, it's this laptop is capital, the desk is capital, the pen is capital, the truck is capital. Okay, these are the things that people work with to bring value. So another way you can do it is you can give people better tools to work with. Okay, and how do you do that? Well, you invest. And so what I did is I put up a screen of non-residential private investment in the United States. The challenges you can see is one of the challenges, again, you get this nice strong growth here, and then it starts to taper off. Okay, you're not seeing the investment, and I think part of it has to do with there's one reason I'm going to show you next, but a big one, and you guys know this better than me, is probably uncertainty. It's really interesting. I was at a conference earlier in the fall, and there was a representative there from the auto industry. And I was fascinated because he says, the auto industry is they don't know what to do. And because one of the things that came up was, he said, all the things that during the Obama administration had to do with the auto industry, President Trump is taking it away. And you think, oh man, they must love that. Well, they don't love it because it's uncertain. They say, well, okay, what happens when the next person gets in? I mean, yeah, as you know, especially in the automobile industry, I mean, you have to see past Friday's payroll. I mean, and they're just kind of wait and see. Let's see what happens, okay? That is one of the things that's going on there. Another thing is, as you know, I mean, most of that stuff is finance, right? So interest rates play a role in that. Now, this chart is probably out of date after what the Federal Reserve did this week. I mean, Chairman Powell was pretty clear to say that, look, we're going to take our time now. In the past, it was almost like autopilot. They would come in, okay, quarter point, quarter point, quarter point. And now they're starting to say, look, okay, we better, we're not gonna just take be on autopilot anymore. We're gonna really look at this stuff to make sure we don't overstep or squash the economy from growing, okay? So this is, like I said, this is a little bit of out of date. This is probably gonna be lower in fiscal year 21 than 3.4%. But I mean, the pressure is to go up. And if one of the things they're doing is, and what they've been criticized about is that why are you raising the rate if inflation is not a problem? And what they're trying to do is, if I can jog your memory from an unpleasant place, macroeconomics, right? One of the things we know is that this is the short-term rate, okay? This is the federal funds rate. The federal funds rate is the overnight rate. It's what banks lend each other to cover the reserve requirements, okay? Though this thing happens very quickly, okay? This is overnight rate. The problem is the effects can take up to a year and a half to be felt in the economy. Fiscal policy hits you very quickly, You cut taxes, people see their paycheck, bam, right away. This thing has to be, this takes a lot longer to go monetary. So that's the thing, that's why they have such a tough job. They're trying to look 18 months ahead and say, where are we gonna be? For you guys looking to buy a house, you guys are probably aware of what's happening with the mortgage rates. And then this is just, the green line is just the prime rate. But the thing to take away is, from this, obviously, is interest rates are starting to head back up. Another reason they're doing it, in my estimation, is because of this. What happened is when during the recession, at some point you hit zero, and you cannot use fiscal policy. You can use just a regular fiscal policy, let's say on the federal funds rate, because you're at zero. I mean, unless you're going to go to a negative rate, which you're not going to do. That's why we had to implement. Well, not we. I didn't do it, but that's why the Fed is implementing things like the QEs, the quantitative easing, QE1, QE2. They were looking for other tools to use. Nobody's going to ask me what our interest rate's going to do. The economists always get that ask that question. Okay. One of the things also that you get from rising interest rates is the rising interest rates tend to push up the dollar, the value of our money. Okay, money, as you guys are very aware, has a price to it like anything else, and it's the exchange rate. So the forecast that was prepared when we did this said that the dollar was going to climb, and when the dollar climbs, obviously, our goods and services become more expensive. Foreign goods become less expensive. So what that does, what it does is, this is called net exports, and this is just the way economists measure it. Basically, we take exports and subtract off imports. And so think of this as a deficit, a trade deficit, and that's probably the easiest way to understand it. As you can see, it doesn't improve. That's the thing to take away. Okay. The other, the big question mark of their tariffs and trade agreements and what's going to happen with them. Looks like they're talking again about what's going to happen with China. I just read an interesting article from the San Francisco Federal Reserve Bank, and it was fascinating because they talk about not only looking at this, but saying, if you look at exports, or let's say an import into your country, how much of it is actually the value generated in the United States? And the example they use is you buy a made in China set of Nikes, $100. Well, China probably gets about $25 worth of that. Most of it is the design that went on in the United States and the marketing and all that. That's really money that's US money. So it's not as clear cut as it is, but I thought it was kind of fascinating. And how that works. Okay, so falling net exports also going to be affected by cooling growth with our trade partners. Okay, what's going to happen with Brexit? I don't know. What day is it? What time is it? Who's in charge? So, and the other one, the big one here is China. China's looking at projected to build about 6% growth in China. And that is very, very slow by historical standards for China. On the other hand, China is actually stimulating their economy. They're trying to stimulate it. So we will see what happens. And again, the other thing is what happens with the tariffs. I mean, a country like China, a big part of the economy is exports, much bigger than us. Okay, so I'm gonna stop talking about the national stuff. Any questions about national stuff? Then I'll talk about, yes, sir.
Back on that interest rate, why did you predict that, are you predicting that the prime rate's gonna go above the 30-year mortgage? Is that what that's showing?
Yes. This is a forecast we buy though, so.
Well, isn't that bad?
Yeah, well, on the surface, yes. Any more questions? You guys have to have good questions. Okay, excuse me, let's go to this. Okay. So let's talk about Idaho revenue, what's going on in Idaho. And really, there's three things we look at when we go to develop the revenue numbers. And this is something we're responsible for. So like the national forecast, we actually buy it because it's cheaper for us to go and buy it from a company that has a staff of like hundreds of economists than us trying to hire more and more economists. So that's what we do there. The other thing is we do our forecast 4 times a year. In our business, we found that if you have to forecast often, okay, because things get dated right away. The classic example, I'll tell you what happened last year, because of the tax reform at the federal level, we had this is a presentation I do for what they call the Economic Outlook Committee. And actually, I do it in 2 steps. I do one that talks about the economy, and then I do it a week later, I talk about the revenues, how that affects the revenues in the state. I kid you not, from the time I did the economic presentation, we had to develop another forecast to do the revenue ones because things had changed that quickly. Okay. So anyway, one of the things we look at is Idaho personal income. You guys know what personal income is? Basically, it's the money people have in their pockets. So that can be, the big one obviously is wages and salaries, Also, proprietor's income is in there. And the other thing that's in there is our transfer payments. So transfer payments that they get from the state, from the federal government, usually, that's all in Idaho personal income. That's a big thing that drives our forecast, okay? Idaho wage and salary payments, that's another one. And where that really drives, obviously, is when we do our revenue forecasting, one of the things we forecast individually is Idaho individual income tax withholding payments. It's huge. So that's something that we can get a really good idea of what's going to happen by looking at Idaho wage and salary payments and how that's going to affect withholding. And the last thing we look at is Idaho housing starts. And the Idaho housing starts, what we found in our research, we could do a pretty good job of forecasting sales tax, gross sales tax, but we found that we could even tweak it further if we looked at Idaho housing starts also. And the reason is because Idaho housing starts can be very cyclical, and all the sales of building materials are actually taxable at the point of purchase. You don't pay it when you buy the house. The contractor buys it when he picks up the lumber. So the swings can actually swing the housing market, excuse me, the sales tax. So let's go look at some of these. So Idaho nominal personal income growth. The quick one here is, it's gonna be about 5.2%, okay? It's gonna grow about 5.2% per year. Now, this is kind of interesting. You see how this is low and this is high? And maybe you guys can help me with this one, because this, I think this is an accounting thing, so it's way beyond the economist, right? The thing is, we looked at some of the data. We have anecdotal evidence. We looked at it. It looks like, because, so this would be, this is the year 2017. Okay, this is the end of the year 2017. When we looked at the data, and I looked at two sources. I looked at tax commission data, and I also looked at Bureau of Economic Analysis data. It looks like money was shifting from calendar year 18 into calendar year 17. At the end of calendar year 17, we could see money just, the collections at the end of 2017 were really high. And that tells me that unless somebody got rich really fast, people were moving money around, pushing money into 17 instead of 18. So if you kind of take an average of this, you're back to really close to this. Does that make sense at all? Is that what were you guys experiencing with the? You guys are talking. What's that?
I don't know. I mean, rate went down, you think it'd go the other way, but we're.
That's what I was thinking too.
I wonder if they prepay state taxes,
But they
but why
prepay.
would,
I bet that's-
why would it be that much to shift your numbers that much?
Well, somebody's
Because
yeah,
you
it's
didn't
moving,
analyze
and
it before.
you know what?
Yeah.
And I also saw it in wages. And what I saw it in wages, and I think, you know, again, the wage thing might have to do with something about, because wages also within it includes bonuses. So money that you could move around could potentially be paying forward. But you're right, they think, you know, and one of the theories we have working now is that the state and local tax, the prepayment, so you could get it, it was the fear that it was gonna go away. So I remember they had to tell people, you cannot pay your 2020 taxes right now. You can only pay the one for the current year or the, you know. So, I mean, is that true? There's no incentive anymore to prepay, or less of an incentive? Because that went away, the state and local. Is it? You guys, okay. So anyway, so how are we gonna get there? Well, we think the two really parts of this. One is, the big one is Idaho wage and salary payments growth, okay? That's the big one, and there you can see the 5.1, 5.2, 5.2, 5.5, excuse me. So how are we gonna get there? Well, we think non-farm employment growth is gonna be about 2.5, between 2.0 and 2.5%, okay? That's a, it's slower. I mean, we're, you know, this is pretty amazing. To have 3 years straight of over 3% growth is very, very healthy. We think we're gonna slow down a little bit. Part of that has to do with being able, the cooling national economy. And then part of it is, you know, being able to find workers. What's gonna happen though, so that's only 2.5%, so where's the other amount coming from? And that is coming from wages. We think wages are gonna start pushing up. In fairness, we've been thinking about this a long time, it just never seems to happen. But finally, it looks like there's some things that are moving now. By the way, our forecast is about 3.2, 3.3, and that is much lower than what they're expecting at the national level. At some points, they're at 4%. I just felt really uncomfortable going to 4%. Even as tight as the markets are, I mean, we're not seeing it here, and I don't think, it just didn't seem realistic. So the last thing, I think this is my last chart. Okay, and this is the last chart. This is the housing starts I was talking about. What we think is gonna happen with housing starts is that it's gonna kind of level off around 16,000, okay? The growth is definitely gonna slow. In fact, you see kind of this, just like a pause right here. We went up to we're up here at, just under 16,000, it looks like from where I can see. And it's gonna stay about there and then kind of, do that. It's not bad. I mean, what's the question everybody always has? I mean, especially if you live in this valley. I know personally, I drive around, it's like, where'd that building come from? Where'd that building come from? And the question is overbuilding. That's always a question. I mean, But to provide some perspective, so here, again, we look like we're just under 18,000 total, 17, 18,000 about there. And we were, at the time, the peak before that, before the 2008 implosion, we were, at that time, anybody want to guess how many housing starts we had in this thing? Over 23,000. So this is strong, but we're not there. And we have a bigger population and a bigger economy right now. So one of the challenges are going to be, I think, housing prices, because affordability, especially if the mortgage rates go up, is going to be more of a challenge. But we feel pretty comfortable with this level of our forecast. And I think that's it. No, oh, look at this. You guys got an extra, do I have enough time? No, is this extra credit? Are they gonna get one more credit if I go and do this one? They told me, they gave me this lecture, you need to talk at least this long.
Yes, you have exactly 32 minutes to finish.
To finish? I can finish before that. Will they still get credit? They've been a good audience.
You can ask questions for 32 minutes, yes.
Okay.
I've been trained well.
Oh, man, I guess. Okay, so this here is the forecast that my office came up for the general fund for the state of Idaho. And a couple things to look at. Really, this is where the action's at, okay? That's over 95% of the general fund revenue right there. So let's focus on that, unless I don't run out of my 32 minutes. So what happened is, and I gotta tell you, so I do this in front of a committee of legislators, and then they will decide if my numbers are reasonable or not. And, oops. So what, bottom line is, they liked this number. They said, okay, thumbs up. Okay. So that's what the general fund, they're gonna.
Going back, what is that number?
I'm sorry, okay, so that is the total general fund revenue we think is gonna come to the state. You should have, does somebody have I saw some of the printout. It's in your printout. But anyway, so if you look at that number, that's about a 0.5% growth, okay? But, oh, I keep on losing my voice here. Can I get some water? I got 32 minutes.
I'll
why
grab
not?
it for you. And I lied, you only have to go 20 minutes.
Oh, 20 minutes,
Sorry.
okay. Well, you can have it back. Okay, so anyway, that's a number that was a number they could agree with the governor's office. But on the out years, they felt that this was too high. These two numbers were too high. So what they did is they used, they came up with their own number. It was the committee median they went with for those 2 years out. And one of the reasons is, frankly, is if you look at this is 8.2% growth from 1 year to the next. And I can understand why someone would have trouble looking at it. If you just look at the percent, it looks goofy. I mean, it looks very, very strong. And so let me try to explain what was going on there. One of the things had to do with some of the money that we would have gotten in fiscal year 19 came in 2018. Look at what happened in 2018. Look at corporate income tax, individual income tax. I mean, 10.7% growth. And if you look, in fact, when we went out and we looked at, not individuals, but we looked just at aggregate numbers, we had an amazing amount of money come in the last minute of the year, especially in individual income tax. Okay, people were filing lots and lots of money. So that I believe is unusually high. So what usually happens is, however, so if the money was supposed to, we were expecting it here and it came in here, guess what? This year, it's not there anymore. So we have to adjust for that. So we did, okay? Now how well we adjusted, we'll see. But that was one of the things. But there's more, yeah, this is like a Rock commercial. But wait, there's more. Okay, something else happened. Okay, in fiscal year 2019, remember we did IRC. Okay, we conformed to, excuse me, With the Internal Revenue Code, we did conformity. So we built that into our forecast, okay? One of the things that happened out of, well, not one of them, two of the responses to the IRC conformity was because when we lost the personal and dependent exemptions, is that, what did Idaho do? Well, we lowered the rates. Individual income tax and the corporate income tax rates were lowered across the board, okay? So it should go down. Another thing that happened was we put in a new Idaho child tax credit, $205 a month. I mean, a month, I wish. $205 a child. Okay? So all of that, when you put the whole package together, this is the number you end up with. And it is a 3% drop. Okay? Now, what about the next? Whoa, wait a minute, you're at 10.2 again. Okay, what happened there is, the big thing there was, remember that's all the things that happened under the IRC conformity? Some of the things that happened there are not as big a weight on Idaho revenues anymore. So what happens is, the way I talk to people about it, I said, think of, you're in a boat, and the boat is a revenue, and you have weights hanging from the boat. And if you, so this is, the first year it's like -3%. The second year, you take some of those weights and you cut the string and they fall off. The boat can go faster now. And that's what's happening here. And if you look here, 5.3, everything's kind of going back to trend. And in fact, I would suggest, whenever we look at this, and I try to tell people this, it's really important, be careful about just looking at 1 year at a time. You almost have to look at both years. Especially since, you know, this was, with tax reform, this is the biggest in 30 years. I mean, it's gonna, oops, sorry. It's gonna, so you gotta take that into consideration. Oops, I'm out. So that's what's going on there. You see this, so basically this is all the things we did working its way through the system. And so by 2020, and then by 2021, by then, we should be back kind of that trend. Again, this looks like a really, sustainable number. That's the trend number. Now, you notice that didn't happen to this. Okay, sales tax, right? You know why? We didn't do anything to sales tax. So it should be doing trend. Okay, how many minutes left? 22.
No, only 16.
16. Okay.
So
I'm open for questions.
how does population growth fit into
It's a good
your
question.
formulas?
Okay, so population growth is gonna push personal income. So that's gonna affect the individual income tax and the sales tax mostly. And then some of it is gonna affect, it drives cigarette tax. And kind of. Cigarette tax, actually, I should say cigarette tax. The total amount of cigarette tax collected is affected by it, okay? But there, the real trend is, people just don't smoke as much as they used to. And that's, I mean, you just put a trend variable and you can see this, it's just dropping. So that's, so that's what's driving it. This is the general fund portion, which is actually set by formula and statute. So, in fact, in this case, there's actually a law in the books, when they put together appropriation, they said, take $10.388 million from the cigarette tax, put it in the general fund to pay the school bond levy. And so this money's actually there, but it's already spent.
And what are you projecting for population growth statewide versus what we're experiencing here in the Valley?
Well, the valley's gonna grow faster. Statewide, we're at about 2% now, and we think that'll kind of just kind of taper down a little bit. But, yeah, you're right, the growth is here in the valley.
Did you cover what Idaho, did you cover already, what did you say in Idaho only inflation was?
We don't have that number, we don't forecast that. Yes, sir.
And your housing starts is kind of two-part. Does housing starts include apartments, and what do you do as far as, like, specifically this valley Is that an influx of population? Is it a shifting? Is it because housing's too high? People are going to apartments with the mass increase in apartment dwellings in this valley. What do you see from your side?
On that one, what we can tell you is, we know that that's what's being permitted, it's based on a permit basis. So what we do is we take the housing permit, and then we take them and then convert them into starts. And, you know, that's a good question. I'm not sure. Because you can make a strong argument for people moving here. The migrants are moving here with money, or they sold their houses somewhere else. They're not moving to an apartment. They're gonna come here and then buy a nice house to sit on a nest egg. And then, so that's a hard one. One of the things we do see, and it's a national phenomenon, is what they call household formations. And what that is it's a little better now about what you really saw during the recession. And basically, housing formations are people hitting a certain age or whenever, a point in their life where they move out. And they buy a house, or they get married, and they start a family, and they start a household unit. And during the recession, I mean, that not only wasn't that, not growing, I mean, parts of it were in reverse. I mean, hey, the people that started the house, their family unit is now back in my family unit. I mean, I always call it the barista in the basement, phenomenon. And so that had to do with just, economic consequences. People would graduate out of college with, degrees and just no jobs. So they had to do something. So that delayed that. And I think it's gonna delay a little bit more, because I think the other thing is, I haven't done a lot of study on this, but, anecdotal, you think about the kind of debt load people have coming out of college. I mean, and how much they have to pay a month just to finance that. So, how many minutes now?
Okay.
Oh, there's one more question.
Go for it.
We're gonna go with the extended cut, the director's cut.
What are the dates on your forecast, and what does it look not like now that we're 7 months into the?
That's a really good question, thank you. So, we are actually running behind, okay? And you guys all know why. Why is that?
Individual taxes.
That's right, withholding. Yep, in fact, I just did my taxes and I owe money to the state of Idaho.
So between.
I knew that was coming.
So between when you did your presentation to the legislature and now, has there been a trend showing up in the sales tax, or the individual income taxes? Because that was maybe a month ago.
Yeah, the trend is, unfortunately, is I miss it every month. By a lot. It's kind of funny, because you guys know why, so I know it's kind of like, yeah, it should be happening though, right? If you look at the tables.
Yeah, do you think it starts?
Yeah, and then, so what we're thinking is after probably within the next couple months, it'll go the other way. Because the thing is, I mean, when it first happened, so my first, July, when I started looking at the numbers, I started thinking about, wow, that's kind of a big miss. This is the first one. Then the second one hit, so I started talking to the tax commission. I said, what's going on? Because it was in withholding, and withholding is the one, man, you can nail every time. It's so regular and so, and then without, well, what happened? The tables changed. Maybe that's what it had to do with it. And so, we still hold the position that the money's there. I mean, you owe what you owe. It's just how much you prepaid, but you owe what you owe. And we think that what we'll see is into the filings season, higher than what I was forecasting for filings, and lower refunds. And fingers crossed, we'll make it up. But everyone I talked to, I talked to I didn't talk in person, but the pro tem did a presentation during the Associated Taxpayers meeting, and he felt 90% sure the money was there. Tax Commission thinks it's there, so.
Question. Let's assume that Idaho increases the minimum wage. How would that impact the out years on the withhold revenue number, or would it?
Well, it would affect the withholding, for sure, because people would be taking home more money. Yeah. So that would go up.
How much of an increase would you expect on that?
Well, I couldn't even guess at this point. I don't know. I don't know.
Just curious.
Yeah, but it would go up because, people just get paid more. Then comes the question, would rents go up? Would, that might go up too with it.
So I have a question.
Okay.
On liquor, on there, it's alcoholic beverage licenses at 0, and then you've got tax on alcohol. And the legislature is talking about changing the liquor license laws.
Mhm.
Will there be revenue associated with that?
Oh, that's really good. That's a good question. Okay, so let me tell you what happened here. So this one is 0, right? Any heavy drinkers on
We can raise our hand back.
the house? That's right. Yeah.
You're not.
Yeah, you're behind the camera. So what happened in the past? What happened was the state government, the general fund got a portion of the license. Yes, this is the licenses. By the way, this is beer and wine. This is not really the hard liquor stuff. And then what happened is that there's just a change in the distribution formula. We still issue licenses. We still owe money, just that the general fund doesn't get any of it anymore. Okay, so that was a change that took place. Now this is stuff that comes out of the dispensaries. Okay, and the way that works is the state gets a cut of it, and cities and counties get a cut of it. So, but one of the things I'm not sure is if the liquor license sales, if it's in that number or not. I'm not sure. This is actually, I know product sales, but the actual license I don't know if it's in there or not. But this is the stuff that actually people consume. And one of the best things ever happened to us in terms of revenue is, believe it or not, well, in my opinion, Washington State got rid of their liquor stores, and the price of liquor in the stores went up, so everybody went to Idaho to buy liquor. On the borders, eastern, Spokane, they go to Post Falls or Coeur d'Alene and buy. Because remember, you pay the tax where you buy it, not where you drink it. Like cigarettes. Cigarettes are the same thing, right? It's where you buy it, not where you consume it. And we have a very low cigarette tax rate, by the way. It's 57 cents a pack. Very, very low compared to other states. Okay, any more alcohol and cigarette questions? Yes, sir.
This is the general fund.
Mhm.
They talk about a rainy day fund or some excess fund. Do you do any projections for that, or have the relationship between these, and if you fall short, is that where it all comes from? Deal with that?
Okay, thank you. He was asking if we project the rainy day funds, and we don't. What we do is, for the most part, we don't formally. Usually, a lot of the rainy day fund things happen at the end of the year. They have like surplus eliminators. And so, like last year, believe it or not, we actually came up, actual revenues were higher than my forecast. So what do you do with the money? And they'll put it, that's one of the places they can put it. And then we have a law also, if revenue grows over a certain percentage, that the money gets put into some different accounts, so rainy day accounts. But we don't actually go on and say, okay, part of my forecast is I think this is much is gonna go into surplus. It's kind of done after the fact, after the money's spent. Well, do you guys know that we publish all this stuff? If anybody wants, what we do is, this stuff we do once a year, and so the new one is out right now. But we also do a quarterly Idaho economic forecast, and this is all free. And then another thing we do is monthly. In fact, we're just starting to see numbers now that monitor our forecast. How well are we doing? So it's like getting your report card every month, and or my report card every month, I guess. So anyway, if you want to be, we notify anyone who wants with email, let you know, okay, it's out, and we provide a link. So if anybody wants one, is it okay if they give you their cards? And we'll put you on the list. I'll be happy to do it. because, you know, it's actually, there's a lot of useful information. I mean, when we do our Idaho economic forecast, I'm kind of giving you the Reader's Digest version. But if you look at like, we actually have the national forecast in there, and it includes a lot of different data tables, and also includes a write-up. So not only give you the numbers, we tell you the story, and Greg does a really nice job of writing up our forecast. So if you're interested, again, you know, it's free, and we're happy to provide it.
So, do you get involved in any of the what-ifs, like pending legislation, or take, for example, I just moved back from Colorado. Does anybody ever come to you and say, what would the impact be from legalization of marijuana? Not that that could ever happen in Idaho, but.
Well, that one hasn't come up. But you're right, that's part of our job. We'll do, like, for instance, one of the things, again, last year in House Bill 463, the proposal was to lower the rate of the individual and corporate income taxes. All the rates, I think it was 0.425 percentage point across the board on all the rates. And we were, or 0.475, I can never remember, it was one of the two. And so our shop was asked, okay, what will that do to the revenue? So that's part of the things we do, and we build models to do that. Yes, sir.
Models for the grocery tax, that's been in the press lately. I mean, there's pros and cons. There's for state tax, Idaho state taxpayers, there's a credit to offset what they're paying when we get out-of-state revenue, people buying groceries in the state. Have you done projections of what if that grocery tax goes away, what will happen to our state revenues?
Yeah, we do it all the time. Because that, you know, we suspect, you know, it's kind of, when we do our, one of our responsibilities is to come up with stuff, and sometimes you have to anticipate, because, well, you know, like, if somebody gives you a scenario, it's not like, yeah, I have this on the show. You know, I mean, it takes a while to build these things up. So we actually have models, and I can tell you, right now, it's looking like, so if you do it, a couple things. Are you guys familiar with the grocery tax credit? Okay, everybody, okay. So we have the grocery tax credit. In the state of Idaho, we also tax food. So it's subject to the 6% sales tax. So we've been asked more than once over the years, because this keeps on coming up, what would happen if you took the sales tax off of food, just food items? And then, without getting into the detail, what is food and all that, but you know, within that. And then you almost have to, once you do that, well, you get rid of the grocery tax credit, because the whole point of the grocery tax credit is to kind of give people some money back off their income taxes, to pay for the sales tax on food, excuse me. So it depends how you treat it, because the estimate, gosh, I think from last year is between $60 and $80 million as a net cost to the state. So you take the money out the sales tax. We figured that almost 13% of taxable sales, gross taxable sales in the state, are for food eaten at home. So restaurant meals don't matter. They're going to stay taxable. So that's what we figured. And if you want, I can give you better numbers. I can give you exact numbers. I kind of just trying to think off the top of my head. Now the difference is between the two, why we have two numbers, is that we have what is called revenue sharing in the state. So roughly 11.5% of what we take in net income tax is returned to cities and counties. So the state doesn't get that portion in the general fund, okay? And that's just the law. That's the way the distribution formula works. And just recently, another thing that came in up is another 1% goes to transportation. So you have to take those numbers off. And so what the difference occurs when you say, well, if we change the law, do we want to keep the revenue sharing and transportation whole, so they keep on getting what they were going to get? Or we say, no, everybody takes a hit. And so they would share in the loss. So, and if they share in the loss, then the price to the state is lower, because we're not reimbursing them. But you know, that's going to come up. I mean, that's going to come up.
You showed some projections on increases to personal income. you purchase indexes, or where do you come up with those numbers?
Okay, the personal income, what we do is, what we do is, we actually have built a model that we build and maintain and run in our office, a computer model of Idaho's economy. And so what we do is we take, those national numbers I talked about, there's a whole big part of it that we feed into Idaho's model. And the thinking being that Idaho, the nation probably has a bigger impact on Idaho than Idaho has on the nation. So we build that into, we build a model that's run by the national. So, and one of the things that pops out, so remember I showed the employment numbers, that's one of the things we do. I showed the Idaho wages, that's one of the things that come out of our model. So, and there are a lot more things that come out of it, I just highlighted things I use for this. So we actually, that's local, that's something we do. Okay, and we do and we maintain. Which, and someone said, well, why don't you just buy an Idaho model somewhere? One of the challenges is, one of the advantages we have is we're closer to the Idaho economy than someone back in Massachusetts. And I give you a good example of that, because when we do our models, it's pretty sophisticated statistics, but it's just, we've always treated it as a tool. So at any time, Greg or I can go and say, that doesn't look right, we can change it. And the model will fit, we'll change the model. And the one always comes to mind is Chobani. So one of the things we look at is, what's the employment gonna be in food processing? This was years ago. And if you just ran the model, it was trendy, just show a trend. We know 600 jobs are coming. We know when they're coming. I mean, you drive by Twin Falls, you can see the plant being built. So what we did is we said, okay, model, you do a good job with the trend, but you don't know this. And we're gonna add some jobs here. And that's why, we've always done it that way. So we always look, if we can override it if we feel we need to. Okay, everybody's still awake. If you're awake, I think you pass. That's how I got through college.